Okay, so picture this. You're working on something big, something truly innovative, and you get a tax break for it. That's kind of the magic of the R&D tax credit, and it's what we're going to be diving into today.
Yeah, it's really exciting, especially with all this talk about these potential changes to the credit, making it even more valuable. I mean, some companies might even be able to revisit past tax filings.
That's right. There's been a bit of a roller coaster ride with this whole, capitalize and amortize thing from those 2017 tax law changes.
Exactly. Before you could deduct those R&D expenses right away. But that change meant spreading those costs out over a few years, which really made the credit less attractive to some companies. But now, there's a chance we might go back to the old way, maybe even retroactively.
Okay, so for our listener today, let's break this down. What exactly is this R&D tax credit, and who can actually benefit from it?
So the R&D tax credit, it's a federal tax incentive that's designed to encourage companies in the US to invest in innovation and technological advancements. You can think of it like a reward for pushing the boundaries. And the best part, it's a dollar for dollar reduction of your federal income tax liability. And in some cases, it can even offset payroll taxes.
Wow, so it's not just for those big tech companies,
No.
or those pharmaceutical companies we always hear about. You're saying my local bakery, or even the machine shop down the street could qualify for this?
Absolutely. It's available to companies of all sizes
Yeah.
and from any industry. The real key is whether your activities meet the criteria for qualified research.
Okay, so let's talk about those criteria then. What does the IRS actually consider qualified research?
There are four main criteria. First, you need to be developing or improving a product, process, formula, invention, really anything tangible. It could be a new type of software, a more efficient manufacturing process, even a groundbreaking recipe.
So creating something totally new, or making something that already exists better, that's pretty broad.
It is. But there's more. The second criteria is that your work has to be relying on hard science principles, engineering, physics, chemistry, biology, you name it.
So we're talking real innovation here, not
Yeah.
just like tweaking a marketing campaign or something. It has to be grounded in science.
Exactly. And it can't be just a random shot in the dark either. The third criteria is that your research must involve a systematic process of experimentation. So testing those hypotheses, running trials, analyzing all that data, like the scientific method in action.
So there needs to be a plan, a
Yeah.
real methodical approach, not just random trial and error.
Right. You need to document that whole process
Right.
and show that you're being deliberate to solve that technical challenge. And that brings us to the fourth and final criteria, which is that your activities have to be geared towards eliminating uncertainty. You're trying to overcome a specific technological hurdle through this experimentation.
Okay, so it sounds like that bakery that we were talking about, experimenting with those gluten-free recipes to meet specific dietary needs, that could actually be considered qualified research. Where's the line then between everyday business activities
Yeah.
and this true R&D?
Yeah, that's a great question. So if that bakery is just simply adjusting an existing recipe, that might not qualify. But if they're going all in, developing this completely new gluten-free bread, that requires overcoming all of those significant technical challenges, like getting that texture right, making sure it rises properly, maybe even creating new ingredient blends. Now, that could very well be considered qualified research.
Okay, so what about a manufacturer trying to streamline their production line to reduce waste? Would that count?
It definitely could if they're using those scientific principles and taking a systematic approach to identify the bottlenecks, test different solutions,
Yeah.
and ultimately reduce waste. Yeah, that has the potential to qualify.
This is starting to sound like a lot of companies could be missing out on this valuable credit. So we know what kind of activities qualify. But what about those costs? What can businesses actually include when they're claiming this R&D tax credit? That's where things get really interesting.
Yeah.
You have three main buckets of expenses that you can include.
Yeah.
You have your qualified labor costs, qualified supply costs,
Yeah.
and contract research expenses.
Okay, let's break those down. What are we talking about when we say qualified labor costs?
This includes the wages of your employees who are directly involved in those qualified research activities. Think like the scientists, engineers, or developers that are working on your innovative project, but it also includes the wages of anybody who's supporting that research directly. So supervisors, technicians, all that.
Now, it's not just the people on the front lines, but the whole team behind the scenes that make it all happen. What about supplies? What falls under qualified supply costs? These are the materials and supplies that are directly used in the development and testing phases of your research. So things like prototype materials, chemicals for experiments, or specific software that's used for that research project.
So if our bakery from before is experimenting with those new gluten-free ingredients, those costs could be included.
Exactly. And then that third category, contract research expenses, that one's a little more nuanced. You can only include these costs if your company bears the financial risk of whether that project succeeds or fails.
You can't just hire someone to do your research for you. Yeah. And claim the credit. You've got to have some skin in the game.
That's right. It's about incentivizing companies to take on that challenge of innovation themselves. You know, at MPowered, we've seen companies miss out on significant savings because they either didn't properly document their activities or they didn't really understand which costs were truly eligible.
Documentation is key. You've got to be able to prove that all the work you're doing and the money you're spending actually qualify.
Right.
So we've talked about what qualifies and the costs that are involved.
Yeah.
But how much is this credit actually worth? What kind of impact can it have?
Well, the exact calculation depends on a few factors, and there are actually two different ways to calculate the credit, but generally, you can expect it to be somewhere between 6 to 8% of your qualified research expenses.
So if a company spends, let's say $1 million on qualifying research activities, we're talking a potential tax credit of $60,000 to $80,000. That's not chump change.
Definitely not. And think about what a company could do with an extra $80,000, reinvest it right back into R&D, fuel even more innovation, hire additional researchers, or help offset other business expenses.
That's a great point. This credit isn't just about saving on taxes. It's about fueling growth and encouraging companies to do that really groundbreaking work. So how do companies actually go about claiming this credit? Is it a really complicated process?
It's not as daunting as it might seem. You'll need to file IRS Form 6765, but the good news is it's specifically designed for claiming this credit. And here's something that might pique our listeners' interest. You can actually go back and amend past tax returns to claim the credit if you qualify.
You're saying there's a chance
Ooh.
to get money back from the IRS for research activities from previous years. That seems too good to be true.
It's definitely worth exploring, especially with those potential retroactive changes we were talking about earlier. Even if that retroactive piece doesn't pan out, there's a 20-year carry-forward option for the credit. So if you can't use the full amount this year, you can carry it forward to offset future tax liabilities.
So it's really about planning strategically and maximizing those savings over time. But all of this can feel a bit overwhelming, especially for companies that are new to this. What kind of help is out there? For companies who want to explore this further,
that's where a company like MPowered Incentives can help. I mean, they really live and breathe this stuff, helping companies navigate the ins and outs of the R&D tax credit, making sure they're getting the maximum benefit.
so they're taking the mystery out of it
Yeah,
and the stress, especially with all these changes potentially coming.
exactly. Their team of experts can help with everything, from accurately calculating that credit to making sure you're in complete compliance with all those IRS rules and regulations that work closely with you to review all those research activities, gather the necessary documentation, and then prepare a comprehensive report to support your claim.
So they're really like a one-stop shop.
And what's great is they don't stop there. MPowered even provides audit defense support. So if the IRS ever comes knocking, asking questions about your claim, you've got experienced professionals in your corner ready to back you up.
That peace of mind, that's got to be invaluable. All right, so we covered a lot today for our listener. Can we recap the key things to remember about this R&D tax credit?
Absolutely. First, this credit is such a powerful incentive for businesses of all sizes in any industry to really invest in innovation. If you're pushing those boundaries, exploring new ideas, using science to develop those new or improved products and processes, you might be eligible.
And don't forget, it's not just about what you're doing. It's also about tracking those costs.
Yeah.
All the qualified labor, supplies, contract research, those expenses can add up to significant savings.
Right. And even if you haven't claimed this credit before, it's worth looking into. With those potential retroactive changes and the ability to amend past returns, there could be savings just waiting for you.
So for our listener today, what's the one thing you want them to walk away thinking about?
I'd say take a close look at your current projects. Ask yourself, am I doing something innovative here? Am I using science and engineering to create something new or better? If the answer is yes, you owe it to yourself to look into this R&D tax credit.
And if they're feeling a little lost or not sure where to begin, MPowered Incentives is ready to help. They can help you figure out if you qualify and walk you through that entire process. Make sure you're maximizing your benefit.
And it's a free consultation, so no risk involved, just potentially uncovering some serious savings That you can put right back into your business, fuel more innovation, and drive growth.
Sounds like a no-brainer. Well, that's all the time we have for today's deep dive into this R&D tax credit. We hope you found this information helpful, and we hope you'll consider taking that next step to unlock the potential of this valuable tax incentive.